All right, thank you. Our next session is going to come from Glenn Fitzgerald, CTO of Fsas Technologies. Glenn, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Morning, all. So I'm a bad guy. I'm from a vendor. So I am going to talk about some of our stuff because it's why we pay for the gigs. But I'm not going to start there. I want to talk a little bit about the issues of risk and ethics and sovereignty in the context of AI and the solutions there too. There you go. It works. So a little background. My name is Glenn Fitzgerald. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Fsas in Europe. Not to my Brexit friend, British guy running a European organization. The business that we're in is the provision of hardware and software and solutions to our customers. We're not a services company. We don't do that. Our point of engagement is with people who buy stuff from essentially from the hardware that's running it up to the applications that deliver a particular solution, and we then can manage it on their behalf, or they can do it themselves. We're going to talk a little bit about principles to practice, about the stuff we've actually done in AI ethics. It's a very interesting field, and its importance has grown in recent years with the rise of generative AI and ChatGPT and Copilot and all those other good things, and the consequences thereof, some of which are great and some of which are pretty malign. From my own personal experience, I received a message purporting to be from my daughter, telling me she'd had an accident and she urgently needed some money. Now, it so happens that I was babysitting for my granddaughter, her daughter, that day, and she was sat next to me on the sofa while she picked the child up. So I knew that it wasn't true, but I'm here to tell you it was very convincing. Had I not known it was not her, I would have at least looked further into it. So this stuff is becoming important. The degree of attack from malign parties, be they state or otherwise, is such that, for example, our own IT in our organization in the UK is attacked 2,000 times an hour. So it takes a lot of protection, and some of those attacks work. So protection against those attacks and recovery from those attacks is also key. And I'm going to talk a little bit about sustainability and the problem that we have with the rapid growth of consumption of IT because of, amongst other things, the growth and use of AI. So, ethics. Fujitsu has been a part, and Fsas has been a part of this game for a long time. In 2018, we were a part of that high-level expert group on AI, which is a European Union organization, contributing to ethics guidance for trustworthy AI, and they produced these 7 areas, the 7 areas that you can read. Societal, environmental, I'm not going to read them, you can read them. But some of those are difficult to assess, and some of them are difficult to prove that you've done. So the key point in all of this field is not being concerned about these things and trying to do something about it. In terms of the regulation that's growing, it's being able to prove that you've done this and to give some indication of the coverage and the results of that work. So we've been working a long time with government and with regulatory bodies to try and understand what this kind of things mean and turn it into a real AI governance process and set of frameworks. This is just some history stuff we've done. I suspect the latest and the most interesting in this context, NIDO asked us to develop disinformation strategies. That work is centered in Japan by our parent, but it's very much at the state level, looking at the way that intrusion can be made into the democratic process and intrusion can be made into that kind of thing and what on earth it's possible to do about it. That AI ethics partnership with that Italian startup, ACOS, is around using AI to demonstrate concern and action, and what provision that action has given you in terms of managing that risk. So this is like all risk management, right? I think that's the message here. Like all risk management, this is about understanding the impact and managing the impact. It's not about prevention. This stuff is difficult to prevent. It's about managing when it does and making sure that when it does, the impact is not so great. I don't have to talk to you, I'm sure, about Jaguar Land Rover and Marks and Spencers and the things that have happened only here in the UK this year from malign agents exploiting AI vulnerabilities and network vulnerabilities and process stack vulnerabilities. The list is very long. The rise of Gen AI has not caused new risks. There is no new ethical dilemma arising from Gen AI. There's just more of it. There's more of it because there's more Gen AI. This stuff is everywhere. Has anybody, just to try and wake everybody up after your coffee, has anybody not interacted with some form of AI in the past week in this room? I didn't think. That's the right answer, thank you. But the fact of the matter is that if I'd asked that question a year ago, the answer would not have been yes. And if I'd asked it 5 years ago, it would have been no by almost everybody. So the rate of acceleration here is enormous. And the areas of concern, biases. Biases is really hard. Some of the biases are the result of the data that the model uses to train itself. Those biases are endemic. They're not intended to be there. They just are, because the way that the data has been gathered and the way that the data describes the problems that it's describing. Working out what they are and combating them, which is a lot of the work that Italian company I just talked about is doing, is difficult and involves a lot of work. The issue of hallucination is a significant one in all of these things. I'll use an example from my own experience that shows my company in a bad light. That always goes down well at organizations like this. The first time we had a sort of corporate offering on an internet platform, it was a visual analytics problem, and I asked it to identify an aircraft carrier, and it told me that it was a lion. This is not accurate. It was hallucinating, as it turns out, because the aircraft carrier concerned was a Second World War British aircraft carrier called HMS Lion, and it had confused the issues. That happens all the time. Spotting it is important. Sometimes it's not that obvious. Sometimes it isn't as obvious as that aircraft carrier obviously isn't a lion. Sometimes it's much more subtle. And you're not told when it's going to happen, so detecting it is important. Robustness and security. I've talked a little bit about deceptive content. I've talked a little bit about disinformation. But the thing that makes these Gen AI-driven attacks different than previous ones is exactly that. It's the precision of the attack. It's the point of attack. It's where they get in. Generally speaking, you used to have things like denial of service attacks, which are just brute strength. Something would repeat over and over and over and over and over and over again till it found a way in. These things don't have to do that. They read the configurations. They understand what they have to do, especially when they're written by people who have a great understanding of the technology, and there's many of those people about. Human agency and oversight. Humans placing excessive trust in AI outputs. In a wider sense, this is a constant source of despair to me. I echo the previous speakers' comments about frustration in the way the world works. I know I'm speaking to a different audience than often I do, and all you people know very well what AI is. In my interactions in my day job, most of the people that I interact with are the CTOs and CFOs and COOs of organizations, large and small, commercial organizations that know they want AI. We want AI. AI is great. I've heard that AI is great. Look, it's got Copilot. Okay. What's AI then? And the tumbleweeds go past. They don't know what it is. They don't know what it can do. But if it tells them up is down, they believe it. You have to moderate that through education. This, I think, is where you guys have got an important role to play in all this stuff. Reducing critical thinking. Another example from my own experience. Inside my company, we have a thing we call the distinguished, I'm going to lean on this because my knees are aching, sorry. Inside my company, we have a thing called the Distinguished Engineers Community. This is about 600 worldwide. These are engineers that are peer nominated. It doesn't have anything to do with management, God forbid. These people are peer nominated as exemplars of engineering effort, knowledge, and application. Those guys are hand-picked, you might say. And this community globally is run by a small group of what we call fellows, because we couldn't find a better name, and I'm one of them. And one of the tasks of this group every year is to curate a set of submitted papers from that technical community and the wider technical community, and evaluate them and work out which 3 or 4 are the best in terms of originality and thoroughness, to be sent on to a wider corporate contest, for which the reward is a trip to Japan to tell our Japanese colleagues what they've been doing. 2 years ago, we've changed things since, but 2 years ago, we noticed that a lot of these papers have got very similar content. And it turns out that of the 73 papers that were submitted, 62 of them have been written by AI. And this is a group of trusted engineers. So essentially, infantilization of the human community is a risk of this stuff. Nobody really knows what it is, but everybody knows it's great because Microsoft tell them it is. Apologies if there's anybody from Microsoft. It's not a dig at them, it's a dig at people. And we have to be aware of monitoring and fighting that. Some examples of attacks, you know, all this stuff. And I'm not going to talk about it in any great detail. I'm happy to run along at quite a pace because it's only a short talk. If there are any questions either at the end, please feel free to ask them or come and find me. I'll be loitering near the coffee for most of the rest of the day. The ones on that are causing the greatest deal of concern in general in my workspace at the moment are the data leakage and exfiltration attacks, largely because the other 3 are better understood and defenses against them are better developed. But data leakage and exfiltration is pernicious. It's linked also with the current, is vogue the word? Obsession might be the word, with European organizations around data sovereignty. The change in this space has been remarkable in the last 12 months. Whether, I can't speculate on the reasons, although one of the reasons has got DT as its initials. And there is great concern about control of data when it's not in your immediate possession or in the possession of somebody with whom you have a trusted relationship. Sticking stuff in a cloud doesn't really cut it anymore, because there's lots of examples of data getting passed on from there in a way that you wouldn't want it to. And I'm not attacking the cloud guys here. They know what they're doing. This is malicious actors doing this stuff. So there's a number of ways of dealing with that. This is the first advert. My apologies. My organization's solution to that is this thing we call private GPT. This is a air-gapped standalone solution. You can either put in your property or we'll hold it in ours on your behalf. It's all yours. You own it. It has it uses one of a couple of LLMs, either the Cohesity model or a French one whose name escapes me at the moment. This has been developed with a European consortium of universities based on the University of Ulm, an organization called SHU. And it is also accessible through, and again, I refer to my colleagues' comments in the first speech, it's also available as a free-to-use sandbox that's located in 3 or 4 places around Europe, where you can access across the internet and play with these things. I think it's got L40s and H100s in it in terms of GPUs, but it's also got a DGX and other boxes as well. You can get access to this and use it as a test bed to work out what you want to do. Because I come back to my concern that in my interactions, not with universities and other learning institutions, but largely with small and medium-sized businesses, they know they need to do something with AI, but they don't know what it is. And this is a mechanism where we can provide them with help and consultancy to let them work out what AI can and cannot do for their business. There are some good examples. One that I've already spoken to a colleague upstairs about is an offering we now completely wrap, which is for legal practices. So this is based around an LLM. It's tuned and modified to analyze, absorb, and present legal case data so that lawyers can quickly find precedent in their discussions about a particular legal case. This is something that lawyers have to do, apparently. I'm not a lawyer, I don't know. But it used to take a very long time because people used to have to go through 5 pieces of paper. Yes, that's right. 5 pieces of paper to find out what the answer was. So come on, ask me about that. That's a good thing. From risk to opportunity, right? So the rapid generation of novel cyber attacks driven in part by AI itself requires equally advanced defenses. But you can't automate it. It's not that qualified. You have to keep humans in the loop. And if you don't keep humans in the loop, you lose control. This is an example of that threat landscape and how it might be moderated through automation of the numerically heavy parts of the protection, but contains overviews of humans at critical points to be able to say, yeah, that's all right. There's a lot in that. Again, not enough time to discuss it in detail, but this is about response to vulnerabilities. That is an offering we have called Cyber Twin, which is just a way of automating those human responses and integrating them into the threat response. Sustainability implications. Right. The explosive impact, I'm not reading that again. So there's a lot of stuff being used for AI. That stuff burns power. The expansion in those rates, especially in Europe, driven in part as well by the sovereignty thing, so people are building their own data centers in their own geography. Not many of you may know that it is now law in Germany that all private data about German citizens be physically held and only held in their federal state of residence. They've asked us to help with that. We don't know how, because it means somebody moving from Berlin to Munich has to have all his data follow him and be deleted behind him. Difficult. But there's a direction of travel here that's putting more and more emphasis on AI hardware installations and data center installations. Some projections soon say that IT will account for 10% of global CO2 emissions. So that's something we ought to worry about and do something about. And you can do that by reducing computer demand, by ensuring that solutions are efficient and fair and secure. But you can also do it with, second advert, apologies, use of new technologies. This is our new processor offering due out at, what year is it now? Due out at the end of next year. This is called Monarca. It's an ARM-based processor, which is effectively twice as power performant as existing traditional models. It isn't necessarily more powerful, and it's an ARM box, so it's particularly suited to some types of workload and not other. The great benefit of this is that it's been developed from the start, as its predecessors were not, because its predecessors were developed to be part of supercomputers like the Riken supercomputer in Japan. This uses some of those technologies in terms of the messaging technology and the tokening technology inside the silicon. It's a 2-nanometer solution. But this has been developed from the start to also stand as a general purpose computing platform by supporting any sort of container you like. Non-VMware. We don't like VMware anymore. There are reasons for that. So this is a new offering, 2026. You can, I know, I'm going as fast as I can. I don't know. It's like having the wife in the corner. And I recommend that as something we could talk about in terms of its implementation. There are already the necessary operating system stacks in various forms of Linux and the necessary tooling to do stuff with this because of the development of an existing platform which already exists called the FX700. So investigate our technologies, come and see us. Go and see the AI test platform at that link. And if you want to talk, that's me. Come and see me. I believe I finished on time, sir. And I apologize. There was a lot there and not very long, but you know, you make the most.
It was fantastic, Glenn. Thank you so much. And I'm going to reward you. With a question.
Okay. Great.
Excellent.
Reward. That's a reward.
Yes.
I had coffee more in mind, but there you go.
So how best does one manage prompt injection attacks in a cloud hosted AI engine where the service provider is mainly in charge of the bulk of security? Then you, the client, would you recommend on-premise AI engines instead?
Whoever asked that question, thanks. There isn't an answer to that. It depends on the circumstances. Prompt injection inside a cloud environment where the service provider is the responsibility of the service provider, but the service provider doesn't have knowledge of the contents of your application. So in terms of whether or not such a person with all the best will in the world and all the right technologies could detect prompt injection when it doesn't really understand the context of the application is a difficult question that you'd have to ask a cloud provider, but I think that would be a difficult thing for them to do. In terms of on-premise, yeah, we can always talk to you about on-premise. The difference really in this context is not that it's on-premise, but that it's being operated by people who understand that context.
Thank you, Glenn. All right. Unfortunately, that's all we had for questions.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank
thank you.